Hi everyone, and welcome to the Peanut Labs Ask the Expert Anything broadcast. My name is Annie Pettit, and I am the Chief Research Officer at Peanut Labs, a company that specializes in self-serve sample. I will be your host and moderator for the next 25 minutes. In these AMA broadcasts, we talk to thought-leading market researchers about anything that interests you. So are you curious about their take on sampling? Do they like talking to people in person or on the phone? How do they market themselves? It can be completely research related or not even close to being about research. You get to be the virtual interviewer. We already have several more broadcasts planned. We've got Jim Bryson of 2020 Research coming up soon, and Tom Webster at Edison Research. You can sign up for either of those broadcasts on the resources page of the Peanut Labs website. You can also watch any of our previous broadcasts there. Now today we are talking with Tamara Barber, who is the head of her own research firm. You can write any questions you have for her in the question box at the bottom side, right-hand side of your screen. I'll start off with a couple introductory questions, and then we'll just start going through as many of your questions as we can. I did get a few questions ahead of time, so that gives you a bit of time to think about what you want to ask. Difficult, strange, controversial questions, just go ahead and type them into that box. So, Tamara, thanks for joining us today.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
That's great. To start things off, why don't you take just a few minutes and tell us who you are and what you're passionate about?
Sure. So, who am I? I can answer that in so many different ways. I suppose to this particular audience, I am someone who is passionate about combining market research with storytelling and really finding the storyline between data points and putting them all together to paint a vivid, fuller picture of what a consumer is like and how to connect with them. And I would also say, frankly, I'm looking at my window right now from Boston, and I'm very passionate about getting out in the sun whenever it shines, which thankfully is happening more often than less often lately, although we did have snow this morning, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, I'm quite eager to see the sun outdoors myself, too. Okay, what is one of the things you wish market researchers were a lot better at?
So I wish, and this is something I wish for myself as well, I wish that market researchers were better at putting together awesome presentations. You and I were just talking about this because I was remarking on how much I liked the presentation that you put together for today. And it is, it's so hard to, especially when you're talking about data, and we all know this, but it's hard to, for us as market researchers, I think, to move outside the typical, graphs and tables. But when we do, and when we do find ways to represent data in really engaging ways, it just makes it so much easier to tell that story. I was reading something the other day. I can't remember who the study was from. I want to say it was from Google, and it was about mobile. And it was a case study about there was a research study that was done that was like tens of thousands of pages long, literally, although I've never seen a research study that long. But, of course, they put it up on the website, and they had a hard time getting people to read it. But what they did is they ended up creating a website that just visualized the data in real time and, gave you cues as to where you could click, and it would change, how the data was represented, and it was very colorful. And, obviously it took some creative thinking and some extra work, but it just made the world of difference. And I just, even though the information wasn't really relevant to anything I was working on at the moment, I sat there and I clicked on that site because it was so cool. So data visualization is hard, and I think it's something we could all get better at.
Do you have any tips on some simple things we could start with?
Oh my gosh. I think you have to start with a really good graphic designer.
So
You
a
have to
third
start with
person, you
someone.
need someone else.
I mean, so I can tell you that my skills don't go past a lot of what we typically do as market researchers. And, I know other researchers who look outside of their skill set to find people who specialize in doing just that kind of data visualization, putting something together conceptually that still represents the data, that tells more of a story. I mean, I think there's an intersection between being able to be creative and graphic in your thinking, but being able to understand data as well. And I think more and more there's a market for that type of person who can do both of those things well.
I know it's not me for sure, because as beautiful as this PowerPoint is, I am lucky to have a designer able to do this for me. I can never do that on my own.
Exactly.
So here we have a question. What do you think the research industry could do better in order to recruit new folks to the industry?
In order to recruit more folks, so, I don't know if I'm coming at this from someone who's just been a part of the conversation for a while, or if it's something that's true, just because I've been inside of it for so long. But we often talk about in the industry that, we're navel gazers, or we're people who are, at least on the data side, quant geeks, right? And again, please tell me if I'm wrong that the stereotype, really truly actually exists, but I know that it's something that's been a part of the conversation in the industry for a while. And I certainly don't think it's true of me, and I don't think it's true of a lot of people that I know, but, it's one of those perceptions that's out there. So, I mean, I think that, I don't want to necessarily say that it's like a cool factor, but I think that there's room to at least modernize what the concept of market research is, modernize what it is that market researchers do. And from my perspective, it goes back to, number one, storytelling. So people remember things by stories. They trade information by telling stories. This is something that if you ever take a presentation class, it's something that you're sort of taught from the beginning, that the more you can sort of weave information into stories, the more memorable it'll be. And, I think what we're seeing in market research now is also more willingness to use technologies, adapt to technologies, build business models off of technologies. And that is something that I think makes the industry more relevant to younger, younger professionals who are used to living in this technology-enabled world. So, I think there's definitely room for just openness to new methodologies, new technologies, and ways in which, young professionals can bring kind of what we're doing more to life.
And perhaps the younger folks are more in tune with these new methodologies, whereas I'll call us old. Whereas us old people, we were raised in surveys and focus groups, and anything else is fancy and new, but it's not.
Right. And also, raised with this real orthodoxy around what a good sample is, what a good panel is, statistical significance, and things that are all very, very important. But to the end client and the end user of market research, doesn't really matter as much as what the story is and what they're going to do with the data.
Maybe that's something we should ask for more from our new folks for them to have more training in those storytelling kinds of areas.
Yeah. I think we can all benefit from it, for sure.
Okay. Let's see. How can market researchers market themselves better?
So I would say, and this is part of the work that I do with clients, both on the market research side and more on the marketing side, but it's all about figuring out how you are unique in the marketplace. Obviously, technology is something that has made certain companies very unique and more competitive in the marketplace. But in general, there's so much information out there, and you can just go online and, find, 100 market research companies, 100 different social media, technology companies. And the trick is really in understanding for yourself, what do you want to stand for as an individual or as a company, and what is unique about your experience, and what can you continue to prove in the marketplace that's going to make you unique. And I really, even though it's a little bit of a cliche, I don't know what the better term is for it at the moment, but I really truly believe in thought leadership and content as a tool to set yourself apart in the marketplace. Because the first thing that somebody's going to do when they learn about who you are, whether you're an individual or whether you're a company, is ask if you have a website, and they want to go to that website, and they want to understand what you stand for and how you're different and what you're doing that's new and interesting and how you typically serve your clients. They want to know all of that before they even get on the phone with you. So I think the more you can establish that and, have that sort of background ready to go and easily accessible, the better off you're going to be to potential clients. So I would say it's all about what's your unique, experience, your unique point of view that you're bringing to the marketplace.
And how do you demonstrate that you are a thought leader? What do you do? What does that look like?
So it's I think there are some typical tools. When I first started out in market research, I sort of looked at where are the big conferences that people are going to, what are the big themes that people are discussing, and looked at how I could participate in those conferences. Start to put together abstracts or what have you. I think you want to develop yourself as a thought leader by going to the places where your clients are. And it sounds really simple, but it does, it takes a certain amount of commitment. And, you want to go to where your clients are at conferences. You want to go to where your clients are reading, blogs, magazines, etc. And you want to push people to be where you are online. So the more content that you can put out there, and the more content that is unique and individual, and again, sort of pushes your ideas of what's unique about your own perspective, I think all of that falls into the rubric of thought leadership.
Okay. How would you say that running your own business is different from working for someone else?
Well, it's a double-edged sword, first of all. I've been doing it in some way, shape, or form for a couple of years now, and it gives you ultimate flexibility, but the trade-off is that you're exposing yourself to more risk than you would if you were at a big company that had all sorts of infrastructure. So, if I don't bring in my own business, I don't get paid, and I don't get bonuses and all that great stuff. So for me, the biggest difference has been, there's not that big corporate infrastructure to rely on. And when, things surprise you in life, as life tends to do, you might not have those safety nets that you would have, in a corporate environment. You might not have here in the United States really, easily accessible health insurance. You might not have, short-term disability insurance if it's not something that you seek out yourself. So I think there's a certain amount of saving for a rainy day that you need to be more aware of when you are running your own business versus working at a company. That's been the biggest learning for me over the past 2 years.
So it sounds to me like you're possibly alluding to some kind of health issues?
Yes, and you and I talked about this before because, you and I are connected on various social networks, so you kind of know what's been going on with me. But I, was dealt, a really big surprise about 9 months ago, last summer, and learned kind of the last thing that I thought I would ever hear, which was that I had colon cancer, stage 3 colon cancer, that I had, put off going to the doctor for, a number of months just because I didn't think it was urgent, and it turned out that it was. And, there are a couple things that I thought at first when I heard it. One of them was, I was just so glad that I had health insurance. Luckily I kind of take that for granted just because of the situation that my husband and I have. But, I really had to give some strong consideration from a career perspective and from an income perspective around how was I going to afford, going through 6 months of chemotherapy and going through surgery and all the recovery, and how was I going to afford that while having to, cut back on my work. And, thankfully, my husband and I were able to make it work, and I'm, so thankful for my clients who were willing to keep me on and be flexible with me, but it was a real big dose of reality in terms of, when we talk about the risks that are entailed in going into business for yourself, not saving for that rainy day is a really big risk because you never know when real life is going to get in the way of all of your great, big, grand career plans.
Yeah, health is in charge, not your career.
Exactly. And without health, there's no career. So, there are certain times in our lives when we just, for those of us who are really career-driven, have to put those things aside and with due cause. So that was one of those times. And I learned a lot, and, just happy to say that I'm on the other side of it now and have a completely, I wouldn't say new, but a very refreshed perspective on, life and what I want to do with it.
Well, I'm delighted that you're chatting with us today on such a good note. It makes me feel good.
Me too.
You've also done some work with the American Heart Association. Tell us about that.
I have done work with the American Heart Association, and not to sound like I'm a completely unhealthy person, because that is the great irony of all of this. But I'm relatively young and have been touched by cancer very personally, and was touched by heart disease when I was in my teens, when my mom passed away from a heart attack. And, again, it was very unexpected. She was very healthy, very active, etc. So, that's the type of thing that obviously leaves a very strong impression in someone, especially someone so young. And at a certain point in time, I had been volunteering with the American Heart Association and learned that they have this campaign in the United States called Go Red for Women, and it's all about raising awareness for women's heart disease. And they wanted real people to come and talk about their experiences with heart disease. And I went and I did it, and I ended up being a spokesperson for the American Heart Association on the side of everything else. I did that for a year, and that was really kind of a good opportunity, again, to step back and, kind of take stock of what's important in life and, give voice to my mom and also just share my perspective on being empowered about your health and being your own best advocate for your health. And also, talk about just how important it is to go to the doctor. For goodness sake, if you have health insurance, go to the doctor when something doesn't feel right. Work will always be there. Work can always wait. It doesn't hurt to take a couple hours to go to the doctor in the grand scheme of things.
Message heard. Everyone will all be going to the doctor. All right, let's get on a much more interesting research topic. How is Hispanic research unique from research with other kinds of cultural groups?
So I don't know necessarily how different it is from other cultural groups in terms of the actual research. I would say that some basic premises apply whenever you're looking at a group that you're segmenting by culture, and that is further segmentation, particularly when you're talking about cultural groups that have very unique subsegments when it comes to how they're influenced by their culture, when it comes to the language they use, the media they use, and how all of that influences, their beliefs and, in the end, their choices as consumers. So I've never once been involved in a Hispanic research project where we haven't segmented Hispanics, segmented this group even further, whether it be by age or acculturation or language use or some sort of proxy for culture, and then understood through, quantitative and qualitative. Usually it's valuable to have a really strong mix but to delve a little bit deeper into, okay, we know that this culture has some sort of significance for you. It has some sort of importance, and there are some sorts of cues that you're getting from your experience with this culture that may influence, how you interact with, financial services brands or luxury brands or what have you. But how important is that influence for my particular brand, for my particular product? And that is always something that's going to be pretty unique from brand to brand, and something that I've always had the experience of learning something new when you're working on a Hispanic project, with, across all sorts of brands, because it's not a very homogenous group. It's not easily boxed into behaviors. It really also depends on what the brand is, what the product is, et cetera. So
do you notice there's any products or categories that are different in particular?
Yeah, so, I did quite a bit of work with financial services at one point in time, and there are definitely differences in how Hispanic consumers, again, depending on, certain factors, but how they want to interact with financial brands online and what type of information they want online, relative to how acculturated they are, relative to how comfortable they are in English versus Spanish, and also what kinds of information they're comfortable seeing in English versus what they're open to seeing in Spanish. Because there are certain assumptions around, well, if it's in Spanish, it may not be that great a translation, and maybe there's a little bit of distrust when it comes to presenting certain kinds of information in Spanish when it's in English as well. But it really, 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 truly depends, depends on the marketplace. Something else that I found when it comes to electronics is that there is a lot of research that's done in Spanish when that content is available. But at the end of the day, especially if it's a big purchase, there's value in being able to see it in both English and Spanish and being able to just kind of understand exactly, what you're getting. So, financial services are big because there's a big trust factor there. Healthcare is important. There's a big trust factor there as well. And, certainly in any instances where a consumer is going to be making a big purchase and there's a lot of research involved, I think really understanding how they want to consume that research, the more you understand that, the more successful that you're going to be in actually reaching the consumer you want to reach.
Okay. So how did you find yourself in the market research industry to begin with?
So I had a boss describe me once as an academic at heart, and I think she was right. I cut my teeth in technology when I was right out of school, and I worked at Apple for 3 years and worked in PR and loved it, learned a lot, but I just found myself sort of hungering for more information, more knowledge, more understanding of kind of what went into the business decisions that were made. And I also had a real interest in Hispanic and Latin American consumers and their use of technology and how technology was actually potentially, this was back in like 1999, how technology was going to potentially change the way that consumers went about their lives. So I really wanted to combine those two passions and felt like there was something just very interesting to me about being able to take what I knew and what I understood about technology, but apply it to Hispanic and Latin American consumers. And I just happened to find a research company that did that type of work and thought, oh, I'd like to do that. How do I get into that? And that's what basically spurred my, going to graduate school and ending up at Forrester and doing kind of crazy research projects on the side and all that good stuff.
So what would you recommend as some really good learning tools, whether it's blogs, conferences, classes? What would you say is a good way for someone to learn more about market research?
I love blogs. I think blogs are so great. They're so accessible. There's so much content out there, and nobody's ever right on a blog, right? There's always more to be discussed, and there's always, everything is up for debate, and I love that. conferences are good to, understand best practices and, hopefully you pick a good conference where there are good case studies. But in terms of things that are just like accessible and easy to learn really quickly and easy to pick up on the trends and the language of market research, I think blogs are they're just fantastic because they can lead you to all sorts of other stuff. Basically, if you want to find out about anything in market research, I would say start with a blog because eventually it'll take you to a magazine or to a conference or to a book or a professor or something like that. So I think there's just so much that you can find, looking at just a number of blogs that have proliferated in market research over the past couple of years.
Okay. What methodology do you think has not gotten the credit it's due?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. I don't, I'd love to still see more, and maybe I'm not looking in the right places, you tell me, but I would love to see more around online qual. And, I think we've kind of as an industry borne out some of the value around communities writ large, but I'd love to, see more around what innovative techniques or what innovative case studies have come out of doing more traditional qualitative research that's done online. That's my answer to that.
Oh, that's good.
That's one I don't think about very often. I'll have to think about that more.
I will wait for your answer.
Okay.
So it looks like we are at the end of our time today. Are there any final things you would like to say?
Well, yeah. So I'm going to say you had asked me a question, or I think you'd put up on your slides, is market research dead? And my answer is a resounding no. It's changing for sure, and parts of it are changing faster than other parts. But more than ever, there's such a thirst for data, and there's such a thirst for knowledge that market research is in a great position. The key, though, I think to those who are going to go far in the market is being able to put all of that data into context. And it all goes back to telling those stories.
Sounds great. Tamara, thank you so much for finding the time to chat with us today and for being so candid about your research life and your personal life. Folks, if you have any other questions for her, you can get in touch with her via email, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, any of those places. This video will be available online soon, and we'll send everyone a link to that. And lastly, here's wishing each one of you top-notch response rates. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.